Toxics listening session. I want to thank you all for coming on Zoom and being prepared to share your thoughts and experiences with us. Before we get started, I just kind of want to give us a high-level overview, and then we have some logistics to go over, and then we'll get in with the presentation that we have for you. And so, basically, CARB staff plans to go to the board with a series of toxic rulemakings over the next couple of years. We have our first one coming up in December of 2021. And so basically we're seeking input from the community to inform us how we can better address community concerns and also help us establish the priorities in our air toxic rulemakings. Specifically, just to kind of seed the thought, we'll have some opportunities for folks to participate in some polls as we go through the presentation, and lots of opportunity for open comment and discussion. But what facilities are of concern to you? What specific things about those facilities are of interest, and what would you expect CARB staff to do to help address those concerns? So basically, how can we help transform your communities into the places you want to live, work, and and play? So just to go over some housekeeping, I'm going to turn it over to to Crystal. And well, before I do that, let me just kind of do a brief introduction of some of the staff that we have here. So again, my name is Richard Boyd. I'm the Assistant Division Chief of the Transportation and Toxics Division at the board. And it's our division that handles a lot of the airborne toxic control measures in the agency. Also here, I do have some staff that work on the control measures in terms of developing them, working with communities, implementing. So I have Robert Krieger here. He's one of the managers in the group. Michelle Komlinik, who's one of the other managers. Michaela Nukel, who you'll hear shortly. She'll be delivering the presentation. And also Stephen Yee. If you had the opportunity to hear our air toxics update at the September board hearing, he was the staff person that was delivering that presentation. So Crystal?
Rich. So real quick, we're just going to go over a couple things. So this meeting does have language interpretation enabled. So if you would like to select down the globe at the bottom, either the English or the Spanish channel, should you need it. And I'm going to pause and let that be repeated in Spanish.
Hola. Les vamos a dar las instrucciones de cómo escuchar la interpretación de un idioma. En los controles de la reunión o en el seminario web, haga clic en interpretación o interpretation. Esto se puede localizar en la parte de abajo. Haga clic en el idioma que desea escuchar. Para esta reunión va a poder ver la opción de inglés y español. Para escuchar solo el idioma interpretado, haga clic en silenciar audio original o mute original audio. Gracias.
Thanks, Julie. All right, Amanda. Next slide. This is a pretty informal listening session, so we encourage folks to put questions and comments in the chat box if you would like to. There's not heaps and heaps of everybody yet on this call, so we're definitely going to take verbal feedback, chat feedback, and we're going to try to translate chat as necessary in the chat box as we go. Just to reduce background noise, we do ask that unless you are speaking, to please keep yourself on mute. If you can rename yourself, if it doesn't display your name, we would ask that you do so. You can rename yourself by clicking the top right-hand corner of your picture. There's 3 dots, and click into that, and you can rename yourself just so we all know who each other are. And then if you do have an agency affiliation, to add that also, just so folks are more aware of who's in this space. Next slide. So if you don't know how to unmute and unmute yourself, you can do it by clicking on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. In the toolbar, as indicated, there's a little microphone. If you are participating only on the phone, you dial *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Next slide. We would encourage you to have your video on if you're able to, just because it's it's a nice, easy way to communicate and see each other's faces. So if you want to turn your video on and off, it's again indicated there, the little camera at the bottom part of your screen. However, if you don't have your camera, or if you just need it off because it's been a very long day and you need to step away for whatever reason, zero judgment. So totally up to you about whether you have your camera on or off, but and assume you can totally make that choice for yourself. Next slide. Again, to participate, you can raise your hand and if you want to participate verbally, and that's by selecting participants and then clicking the little blue hand. Next slide. And the chat box is also at the bottom there as indicated, and also any questions, concerns, issues, anything, please feel free to throw that in chat. And all of this is being recorded for the purposes of notes. And so this right now is all being recorded. So everything that is said in chat or verbally will be captured because we really want to hear what everybody has to say. So thank you for your time. Back to you, Rich.
Okay, so without further ado, we'll go through a brief presentation just to kind of help set the stage, set the scene, and then we'll get into some polling questions. Some of those will come up during the presentation, and then we'll have our open comment session. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michaela, who's going to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Rich. Hello, everyone. My name is Michaela Newcall, and welcome to our first Air Toxics listening session. Like Rich said, the purpose of the listening session is to hear from you. But first, we would like to provide a little background on the Air Toxics program. CARB's Air Toxics program is designed to identify and control air toxics, inform the public of significant air toxics exposures from businesses or facilities, also known as stationary sources, and require facilities to reduce those risks. And it also addresses the health impacts of toxic exposures to communities and ensures our measures adequately protect children and other sensitive receptors such as schools, daycare facilities, and residential care facilities. On September 22nd of this year, CARB staff presented an informational update to the CARB board on California's air toxics program. The board gave CARB staff direction to continue our efforts to move forward with the air toxics program by focusing on air toxics within AB 617 and other disadvantaged communities. They also supported our efforts to continue to improve community engagement to ensure full and meaningful participation in our air toxics program and in efforts to reduce adverse health impacts in communities. Next slide, please. So next, I'd like to briefly cover what are air toxics. So air toxics are emitted from facilities or stationary sources such as, but not limited to, chrome plating operations, oil refineries, and auto body shops, etc. And air toxics are also emitted from mobile sources such as cars, trucks, and freight activity like trains in a rail yard or ships at port. Air toxics or toxic air contaminants are air pollutants which may cause or contribute to an increase in cancer and other health impacts. California's air toxics program began in the early 1980s as a means to address harmful toxic air contaminants. Made progress in reducing statewide emissions, there is still much more to be done to address health impacts from air toxics in communities. Next slide, please. So in order to better understand the concerns and ideas regarding air toxics within each of your communities, we would like to poll your responses to a few air toxics related questions. Next slide. So those of you using Zoom on your computers will be able to participate in this poll. For those of you attending this meeting over the phone, you will not be able to participate in this poll, but will have opportunity to participate later in the discussion and the survey. For those of you on your computers, the poll will show up in the middle of your screen shortly. Please answer all of the multiple choice questions, then scroll to the end and select submit. If you do not see the poll, you should be able to select the poll icon at the bottom of your screen. Okay. So we'll give everyone a few minutes to so we can give everyone a few minutes to discuss the poll or to fill out the poll, and we can discuss it.
Are you guys seeing it?
Yes, I
Okay.
see it.
Okay.
I just launched it, Crystal.
Oh, good. Okay, it disappeared on my end. Thanks, Amanda.
All right, looks like some votes are starting to come in. Question one is asking about attending more listening sessions such as this. And we're just trying to gauge people's interest and if they would like to see more of these. And I see some people on question two are responding to which air toxics regulation are you most interested in. So I see people selecting other. So you can use the chat and just go ahead and drop down there what the other is that you're thinking about. So I see that Jim Kennedy has dropped something in the chat about what he wanted to see in the other. It's asking about petrochemicals, benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, xylene.
Thank you, Jim. Oh, I see another chat that just came up. Refineries with VOCs and railroads and other stationary polluting sources. That's good. Thank you.
You asked them about when you start the car, it makes that sound.
Oh, another chat comment came up. Can we get a brief history of air toxics AB 2588 and the success to date? Okay, that was from Ed Ward. That's good. We can provide a brief summary of that. And Kimberly echoed that response as well. Yeah, a brief summary of the 2588 program is the Emissions Inventory Right to Know Act that was adopted in 1988. That act required facilities to report their air toxics emissions on a routine basis. And in doing so, we were able to collect the emissions inventory for many of the air toxics and at least all the toxic air contaminants we've identified to date, plus an additional few hundred that were listed on different websites and EPA's websites for being hazardous air pollutants as well. But in doing so, this has resulted in us, CARB, getting the emissions data from these sources. 2588, as you might know, also has a program where you not only report your emissions, but you also prioritize facilities based on whether they are high in a high priority category based on their risk and exposure to low, medium to low categories. Those who score in the high category are required to do a health risk assessment. Those facilities who conducted health risk assessments will need to, if they're over a significant risk, they will need to do a risk reduction audit and plan. In other words, a risk reduction measure to reduce those risks. The program has been very successful to date. I know back in the time, there are over 200 health risk assessments that were done since that time, which ended up resulting in a number of risk reduction plans from those large facilities as well. So the success of the program has been successful. Obviously, there's still more to be done, but the 2588 program actually just recently went to our board in November and was approved. At least most all of it was approved with some 15-day changes in November 19th. That also added an additional several hundred compounds or toxic compounds to the reporting, requiring additional source categories to report their emissions. So it was successful, but we're hoping that with this new rules and regulations, that we're going to be able to track emissions from several more hazardous compounds from not only the large facilities, but also the small facilities as well. So thank you for your question.
Okay, we can go ahead and end this poll, and then there's some details here that we'd like to talk to you about at the end, but let's continue with the presentation.
So Rich, if we just want to open it up for comment on these questions.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. One of the things I wanted to ask about was just to kind of see the discussion, and I'm not certain who all positives possible, but it said refineries with VOCs and railroads, other stationary polluting sources. I think we understand, when it says refineries and VOCs, but is there anything specific about the railroads that folks are concerned about? And then, what are the other stationary polluting sources that are of concern there? Are they separate from what's at railroads and refineries, or are they part of that? So we can just kind of go ahead and open the discussion. So you can unmute yourself and we can just kind of talk about that a little bit.
Okay, yes, and I apologize. This is LaDonna Williams. For some reason, I cannot change the organization name and have both of them. So anyway, good evening, everyone. The answer of other had to do with the raw sewage plants that are located. So those are stationary sources that are directly in especially disadvantaged communities. And it's a pattern. Vallejo has them directly in our communities in South Vallejo. Across the water, a quarter mile, is Rodeo. Their raw sewage plant is directly across the street from the low-income public housing. And the same occurs over there in Hunters Point, where you have, the same stationary source that includes these other, refineries and other polluting sources. But it seems to me that the odors and the pollutants that come out of the raw sewage plants never seem to really make the chart. So that was what I meant by other sources, and it didn't give me the ability to type that in. Thank you.
Thank you. On one of the chats too, and Jim posted the group of harmful petrochemicals known as BTEX. Were you specifically targeting a specific source of those, or was that just a general comment?
And Jim, if you're talking, you have to unmute yourself. Okay, maybe Jim's having some technical challenges.
Yeah.
Another question that I had. It looks like everybody who was here indicated that they're interested in attending like more listening sessions. And so, one question is what expectations do you have from us of those sessions? This is like the first one that we've done specifically for air toxics, and so we're definitely interested on how we can make them more valuable for you. So does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Did you want us to do the raise hand feature or just kind of chime in? Because
I would say, since it's a relatively small group, we don't need to be so formal. So just go ahead and unmute yourself and chime in.
Okay, well, I was just going to say, this is LaDonna Williams again. I appreciate the invite that came from one of your staff. I don't always check your blogs and your website. So the email, to send out notices or even, sending a text was very helpful, especially after a long day of all these other Zooms. But I think this is a great start in having these informal sessions where we can kind of get in our concerns and you're not having to blurt out all of your concerns in 2 minutes and be shut off. I think this is really a great way to communicate. But I would also like to see that please don't do breakout sessions. We lose so much information and interaction and communication, not only to address our concerns, but to hear what others are, putting forward. We learn that way by sharing and then listening. And we lose a lot of that content when they do these breakout sessions that I don't think we get a lot out of. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on that particular question there?
I see a response from Ed about having these sessions as providing education. And I think that's something that we're looking to do as well. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're holding listening sessions like this, and maybe in the future too, where we can educate the community as well as you educate us too on what's your concerns are as well. Is there any specific type of things that you would like to hear from us, maybe either now or in future sessions?
Robert, thank you for your comment. This is Ed Ward. Just one of my comments is, I agree BTEX, some of the chemicals that were earlier discussed are critical to our communities, but too often the word service station comes up as the gross polluter. And coming from the fueling industry, I'm not here to defend it. I'm looking to make sure that our communities are well protected from toxics. I have grandchildren that I want to see flourish moving forward. But particularly in the case of service stations, as some may know, every single component in And a service station is a CARB certified component when it comes to gasoline components. And there's no operation at any service station of the 13,000 existing gasoline dispensing facilities in the state that is legally operating without CARB certified components. And those CARB components have a level of efficiency that is between 95 and 98% currently. And it's the best available control technology that we have to date. And that's the kind of education that I think is important for our community to understand. Yes, there are spills, things like that disseminate these hazardous chemicals. But typically, it's the gas station should not be the fall guy for this, in my opinion, anyway.
It's good. Thank you, Ed. No, and we appreciate your comment. That's you're right on all those fronts there with the sharing of the data. There, obviously, you've done some homework on this, and you're familiar with it. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to get out of this too, is to educate the public on it. Sounds like not only just air toxics in general, but even some of our regulations where we control some of these things, is like for example, gasoline dispensing facilities.
Like Jim, you put your blue hand up.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Was I called on?
I was going to say, I see Jim Kennedy, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Right. I just wanted to follow up that comment that it's not the dispensing, it's not necessarily the evaporation of gasoline. It's the refining process. Right now, citizen scientists are putting up air monitoring systems around the fences of refineries and finding all sorts of BTECs in the air. But it's also in the internal combustion engines that releases the BTECs into the air. The BTECs are put into gasoline as an additive for the octane for it to be able to combust, and they've been reduced and they've been replaced, and different levels of BTECs are in there. But that's the carcinogen that's in the air that affects people's health the most, and doing the most to replace those BTECs that get burned in internal combustion engines that we'll have now for 10, 15, 30, maybe even longer. Even after zero emission vehicles are more prevalent, there'll still be a lot of internal combustion engines. We have to get into those tanks and replace all the toxins that we can. That's my comment.
Thank you, Joe. No, that's right. It's good. Good comment.
Looking at the, so I'm just going to ping off some of the questions here. Looking at the second question, we touched upon this a little bit when we were talking about the other, but I see somebody had indicated, CompWood as being the one they're most interested in. What specifically about CompWood is, the concern there? Because I mean that's another, control measure where we are looking at some amendments. And so it'd be good to get a little more resolution on that. So I'm not certain who made that comment, but again, you don't have to, it's still a limited number of us, so you don't necessarily have to raise your hand. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and, make a comment. I don't know if the person who made that comment is still here about CompWood, or if there's any other comments on that or thoughts, concerns. Well, since we had somebody mention that, Robert, could you give like a brief, 30-second high level summary of what we're doing on CompWood, just so folks have a little broader understanding of what's going on with that control measure and some of the things that we're thinking about, and so maybe we can get some input based on what they hear.
Sure. That's I'll provide you a brief summary of what's going on. As probably the person who made that comment knows, that we adopted a control measure back in 2007 to control formaldehyde emissions from composite wood products. These products are used in many of consumer products, flooring, cabinets, furniture, those types of things. And we set at that time we set emission limits for these for the raw products to be complied with by industry, the manufacturers, and distributors as well. So what we're looking at in the future is planning on amending our regulation to capture more formaldehyde emissions or reduce more formaldehyde emissions. And we're looking at potentially adding a few more products to be considered for emission standards as well. So that's one of those things that we've done with our enforcement division and our monitoring and laboratory division. We've looked at tested a few different products, and so that's what we're considering doing as well. We're also looking to tighten our regulation to align with US EPA's recent regulation as well, but also to reduce the emissions by making all testing equivalent on all of our products. So in other words, we're ratcheting down our regulation to increase the potential emission reductions from formaldehyde from these products, and that will happen within the next 1 to 2 years.
Okay,
and I
thank
just
you,
wanted
Robert.
to mention too. Thanks, Rich. I wanted to mention one other thing too. As you know, in any of our regulations, and especially for any of our air toxic control measures, ATCMs, we have a full public process where you have the opportunity as the public and associations to input into our regulatory process, your concerns, your ideas, and participate in work groups, in meetings, and those types of things before we even go to our board with the regulations. So we wanted to make sure that is open to you, and that if you would like, we could actually put I could put the links in the chat function to be signed up for our at least our next two ATCMs that we're developing for Compwood and chrome plating as well. So you can at least subscribe to those and keep informed of what we're doing.
Yeah, and Robert, and that's a great segue into like one of the next questions. And I'm skipping down to like, if you're following the poll, to number 5, what public meetings work best for your community to participate on CARB's regulatory, actions. And so, I mean, there's a number of things that fit into that. One is meetings like this, the listening session. But also when we're dealing with specific control measures, we do have, technical working group meetings, just where anybody can come, anybody can participate in those technical work group meetings and provide input and commentary, information, data that's used to inform the development of the regulation. And so it's an opportunity to actively participate in that process and help shape what the final regulation or the proposal that we take to the board is going to look like. The board makes the ultimate decision. We make a recommendation, but it's an opportunity where folks can work right alongside us in shaping what that recommendation is going to look like. But some of the other options are, and I'm just kind of curious of where people might be, or if they find it useful or want us to think about it, try to engage in that. Is it useful for us to come to your meetings and provide updates there on control measures we're working on, or just have general discussions about concerns, basically plugging into your routine community meetings? So would folks find that helpful? So just trying to find get a sense of what's the best way to make sure that we're engaging with you, trying to make it as easy for that access as possible. What's best for you?
This is LaDonna with All Positives again. I think all of the avenues are what would be good, because as we know, no one community, it has the same characteristics. So I think to have all of those opportunities, doing your workshops or informational system sessions, the allowing the community to work with you on these technical work groups, and also the community inviting you guys in. I think those are all great things. But I would like to suggest as well, through these work groups, I'm not saying just in every session, that we attend, but especially when we've committed a lot of time and commitment in these work groups and working with you guys, I think it would be really beneficial to the advocates in the communities to, at the end of the workshops or the sessions, to provide them with certificates of participation. That doesn't mean that, because we would get a certificate from you, we are now certified in this type of work. But what it does do, it helps empower the community when they do seek funding sources, say outside of CARB or their air district. It's an acknowledgement that the community has committed time and effort in a particular issue that they are trying to address. So I would like to see CARB consider offering these certificates to those that would request them.
Okay, that's an interesting idea. And and would that be something that could be like distributed, electronically, or I mean, what would be the expectation in terms of how that would be delivered?
Yeah, okay. So I can share with you, and this was some years ago. We worked on fish quality, the bay fish quality monitoring and uh, um, testing. And there was a number of us from various communities that engaged with the Office of OEHA, I think it was their investigative branch. And we put in, some significant time. And at the end of that, we suggested, hey, we put in a whole lot of time with you guys. Why don't you provide these certificates? And they actually did. And at that time, of course, that was way pre-COVID. We were able to be handed the certificates, but I definitely think they could be done, through the internet as well. And I take it back. Is it it's I can't think of them now, but it is an agency group that does a lot of webinars, and NIH, National Institute of Health, they do for certain webinars, depending on how many sessions you attend, they do issue you certificates of participation as well. So yeah, it can be done, through the internet where you can make them up and send them, and we print them out and frame them.
There you go. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting idea. We're going to have to talk about that. Um, see how we bring something like that on board. I thought I saw Jim Kennedy's hand up.
Yeah, earlier you mentioned that this process is going to be somehow connected with the AB 617 or CARB asked you to, in this program, focus on those areas. And so when you talked about going out into the community, I was wondering, how are you working with AB 617 emission reduction programs as they identify, they've been given specific new regulatory authority to identify with their local air quality management district new items that they would need to address that they may not have the tools, but to be able to work with their local air quality management district and then CARB to certify a new way to address air quality in their areas. And so if you're looking at new ways to affect toxins which affect their health, and ultimately what they're going after with why AB 617 groups were created for was to go after toxins. How's this program connected with those efforts?
Robert and Michelle, you guys want to jump in on that one and talk about like the service and whatnot?
Sure, I can.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I'll start, and then Robert, you can
right.
jump in. So we have been working with the AB 617 team at CARB. Part of that's been, speaking with them, helping try to understand what source categories have been identified in the SERP. So we've spent some time pulling out where we think, as far as stationary source measures, where we think that it might make sense to do a statewide measure. Perhaps there's many sources, or it's a compound that's come up, or a source category in many of the SERP. So we're trying to kind of sort through those, and we continue to look through those as we get more and more of those coming in. So we'll be looking at those as kind of a prioritization method, and and we're also working with the AB 617 group at CARB to understand a little bit more about what they're hearing in the communities, what the conversations have been, what have been the sources that have been coming up at the steering committees and through other meetings and workshops. So I don't know if you want to add anything there, Robert.
Oh, that was very good. I think that the point being is we're aware of the work that OCAP, our Office of Community Air Protection, is doing, 617 group, and their involvement with the steering committees and with the local air districts as well. We've been looking at the community emission reduction plans, like Michelle said, to see what the communities are saying about air toxins and about their concerns. And those were specifically very tuned in to what the communities are saying. We have been attending meetings as well, 617 meetings. We've been listening to, carefully and intently to hear all the concerns and to hear the toxics you're talking about and the potential hazards that you are experiencing within your communities and what can be done. So in that way, we're keeping it involved with the situation, and from the data that we're going to get from these SERPs and from your communities, that helps us make better informed decisions on what we need to take a look at from a statewide control measure or a statewide actions for air toxics.
And then I think one thing I would add on top of what Michelle and Robert said is when we're working through the process that we follow, that the local air districts are involved in that. And so it's not something we're doing in a vacuum in that regard. And so everybody is able to actively participate in that process.
I just wanted to add one thing that, it's a two-way conversation. Definitely hear from the community, because they sometimes, ground truthing, and they're there and they see things that other people don't, and they just have more manpower. But at the same time, a lot of these community steering committees get a little frustrated that they're expected to come up with the ideas and solutions, and they're asking also the agencies to provide them with almost like a cafeteria menu of like, well, these are the things that you should be considering. Here are some of the options. Here are some solutions that we know, as I think Michelle was talking about, statewide identified problems, so that they don't have to reinvent at each AB 617. They don't have to build up all the solutions from ground up, that they can also get from experts on air quality what solutions are already known to be available to them, so they can start to bring down and add those to their efforts.
So yeah, I think that's an area where we can definitely help in terms of seeding the discussion. I think that's what you're kind of getting at, putting some ideas on the table and explaining what those are, what they mean, and so folks can kind of look at that and understand what the impact in the community is going to be, rather than just being asked to come up with all the solutions. Just have something to seed the discussion. So yeah, I definitely think we can help with that.
And I was just going to say a good example of that is with the railroads. For us, even though we have them directly in our community, we've been always focused more on just the noise pollution from them. When you're hearing the horn and not realizing that you hear it, but your body actually does react to it. And then the light, right, especially at night. But we don't really realize or focus on, or I shouldn't say we don't realize, but a lot of the residents don't realize the impacts that we're being hit with from what comes up from, I guess, I don't know the proper term, but the junk that's kicked up into the air from, the tracks and the health effects from that. there is a lot of breathing issues. There is a lot of high blood pressure. And I'm reading also that there is a high cancer rate of those of us that live, say, a mile from the railroads. I think the I keep saying air district, CARB can do more outreach, especially supporting and funding community groups that are working on this, but providing that information to the communities about the effects from the trains themselves. I'm sorry, it's been a long zooming day, and I'm just almost tapped out trying to talk and make some sense here. But yeah, if they can do that, then we don't have to try and reinvent the wheel. We're actually working with you guys to do some outreach and stuff. And so, I know COVID has turned everybody upside down, the wildfires and just the madness of 2020, but where is CARB also with the funding needed to be able to support communities to do this work? That's important. And the more they delay it, the more, it puts us in struggle mode and the inability to address these concerns.
This is Ed. I'd like to add a comment to that because I happen to agree. In fact, I'm a little bit in dismay being on both South Central Fresno and Stockton, which have huge rail facilities in their AB 617 footprint. The general consensus is that the rail community is very difficult to work with, and let's take our money and spend it on other issues at this point in time. I have worked with some of the rail systems, and they really do act independently. And if there's a way that CARB could help bring them into the fold and help them become more accountable to their emissions in these local areas, that would probably be very valuable.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I can say and I'm not certain if folks are aware, but we have been looking at, what we can do to, reduce, emissions from, locomotives and, and rail yards. And we do have, that activity going on within the division. And there's been, some meetings about that. So I don't know if folks are aware of that. If not, we can definitely get that information out to you and make sure that you're plugged into, that effort, because there's some activity there which gets at some of what you're talking about. But I do understand the point you're making about some of the challenges that come up when you're dealing with rail yards in a locomotive industry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you guys got some great folks like Jose Saldana, and I believe it was Jennifer that connected us to that subject. We had been affected by it, but just not really realizing where to turn because railroad folks are not very responsive at all. But they've been great, and especially with the EJ. I need to say that too, that we need to ensure that CARB is taken seriously, the EJ component that should be in everything that we're doing, but especially the communities, these frontline EJ communities that are impacted by this. They have reached out to us to say, hey, we're here to help support that, and let's start these conversations.
Hey, LaDonna, this is Jose. I was thinking back to what you asked about the certificates, and I was wondering if you saw a value in them as maybe resume building for some of the folks that don't have nonprofits yet, but that are working towards that. And so, absent the opportunities to do some of the work, if they participated in meetings like this and got certificates, do you think that would help with, applying for grants or stuff like that? And I don't know, maybe the folks I should also be asking are the folks that distribute grants. But yeah, just wanted to throw that out there for food for thought and to see if you thought it could have value as that.
Absolutely, Jose. It definitely has. That was the reason why I kind of mentioned it. Thinking back, it's like things that we did in the past, folks kind of think we're so much more advanced now, and then we actually end up recycling and coming back to that which works. That's exactly how some of us got our start was, before we were able to either form nonprofits or become part of one, to have those certificates that just validates the time and commitment that community advocates are putting into this, and they don't all have the savvy and the knowledge, or I shouldn't say savvy, but they're not at that point yet to either form an organization or really connect with one. But those certificates really do build those blocks to help get you there, as well as the groups that are established. As you know, many of us are still undersourced, but it really has helped us when we have went for funding when they ask, well, so what have you been involved in? It's very helpful to be able to present those certificates to show what we've been doing. And we've heard from some agencies who are, oh no, because then that means, we're co-signing you as experts. And no, it's not that. It's just an acknowledgement of the valuable time and commitment that many of us put into these issues that really could be eliminated if agencies did their jobs, right? We wouldn't have to be taking this on, but since we're forced to do that, then, give us or share with us as many tools to be successful in the work that we're trying to do that helps agency as well. If we're really talking about equity and access and inclusion, then the agencies who do have the money, should use those resources to help empower the community and really help us build our capacity to do so. So thank you for following up on that. But yes, it is an important tool. If CARB hasn't considered it, you should really consider it, because the National Institute, the investigative branch with the fish work, and there were two others that did that in the past, and we're talking, it was probably about 10-15 years ago, and somewhere along the way they stopped doing it, but I'm telling you, it is helpful. So thanks for following up on that.
Hi, this
Well,
is
thank you for
Kimberly
that response.
Hi, this is Kimberly McCoy. I just want to add on to what's being said about the certificates. As someone who's from the Central Valley, Fresno, actually, I was looking for ways on how to get involved in my community, trying to understand why I suffered from asthma, trying to understand the stench in the air around my house because we were living on by industrial facilities, slaughterhouses. So by me becoming a volunteer with a nonprofit in Fresno and being able to understand the importance of what was going on, why I had asthma, why when I was born in the 93706 zip code, 20 years were automatically taken off of my life because I lived around an industrial facility and lived around slaughterhouses. Providing a certificate to residents because they're volunteering their time, they're putting in all the work, and they're also learning and becoming an advocate for their community and their neighborhood and also their family. This validates them and also gives them inspiration to want to do more and to become more of that advocate in their community. I started off as a volunteer. And then from there, I was able to work myself up to team lead, then to a community organizer. And now I work for Fresno Building Healthy Communities as a project director, overseeing all of our projects that we are implementing in Central Valley. So when you give certificates to residents, acknowledging their work, acknowledging their time, you're actually finding leaders. You're actually creating leaders and providing this knowledge to residents who may not never know what's going on. Why are they breathing funny? Why is this facility next to my neighborhood and to our neighborhood park? Why we don't have enough parks in our community? So all these questions will get answered once we start educating our residents and providing them with these certificates. Just makes them get more involved. And you never know, we may be looking at our next city council member, we even may be looking at our next senator. So it's an incentive to the residents, just like the residents who sit on the AB 617. They volunteer their time for a year, and now they're starting to receive a stipend. So this makes them want to keep coming back. So when you provide incentives to residents, they get more involved and they start to care about what's going on and what they live by. So I just wanted to add how important that is.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. We appreciate that. Okay, I just want to make sure that we had a chance to touch on some of the other questions here. I skipped over 3 and 4 because I thought some of those had come out, but I just wanted to make sure if anybody had any additional comments on those two. That was a question about like how you heard about the listening session and the actual platform that's being used. I would say based on what's going on right now actively at this particular meeting, that folks seem to be syncing up with Zoom pretty well, and the poll. But
I
one other
don't
question.
know if I was going to say the only screen other than the poll that you did initially, I just only have seen part 1 and 2. There's been no other screens for us to follow what you're saying, at least on my end, and I'm using a phone. But it did allow me to do the poll.
Right. Yeah. So the presentation was actually shortened. So the part that's showing up there is just kind of a slide up for discussion. So it just says, yeah, some starter questions, part 1 and part 2. So that's all all that we're broadcasting on that right now.
Oh, okay.
So you're seeing, you're seeing what we're broadcasting, and then
okay.
of course,
I thought you were mentioning 4 and 5. You were saying that, and I didn't see that.
Oh, the poll questions. So questions, yeah, that was referring.
Oh, okay.
I apologize. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And then one other question I had, I just wanted to make sure that I understood this. It was about the language, what the preferred language is to receive the materials. And everybody marked other. So I was curious what the other languages were, because I was assuming it wasn't Spanish, since we have Spanish interpretation and we have the questions translated into Spanish. But are there other languages we need to be aware of?
There wasn't an option
English
for
wasn't.
English.
There's
yeah,
no
I was
English.
gonna say the same thing.
Oh, okay.
I think what we
So
should have said
it
is,
was the obvious one then. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, the way it was written, it wasn't like other than English. It didn't have that.
right. That's our mistake. So other than English and Spanish, which we are
Spanish.
already doing and intend to continue
Español or Inglés.
Thank you.
Yeah, because we would universally have English and Spanish. Yeah, and so the intent there was to see if there were any additional languages that we needed to be aware of, just to make sure we're reaching everybody. Okay. All right. So are there any other questions or thoughts? That's kind of completes the walkthrough of the actual poll question. I just wanted to get some additional insight on what people, were thinking. And I don't know if, Robert or Michelle, if you guys have any additional thoughts out there, questions to ask.
No, I think if anyone has questions now, we're definitely open to hearing you've provided several good comments and questions, and there's been some good dialogue from you, and we appreciate your comments sincerely, and we're taking all these down. And if there's anything else that you have, even beyond this chat, you can always you use the contact the people who are on the slide presentation as well for additional questions and comments.
Yeah, and we heard a lot of good things tonight with respect to some source categories that came out of the conversations. But as you talk to others, or you think of others that are important to you that you would like to see, being considered for future rule development, please send us an email. I think on the last slide we're going to have the email. Michaela's email contact is up, so you can send them to her, and then she'll make sure that we get all the information that you send.
Yeah, that's good. And again, you mentioned that, or at least most all of you mentioned that you were interested in attending more listening sessions. And if that's the case, then if you have any ideas or suggestions about what you would like to hear in these listening sessions, you can send those to Michaela as well.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to throw in there that I'd like to see CARB have some listening and discussions like this on race and equity issues. I think that's very important. It's a subject we keep kind of tapping on, but folks don't dig into enough. And I think if we're talking about really EJ for all, with the emphasis on all, then we've got to start with those who have been left out of that EJ process, which is, poor, low income communities, severely disadvantaged, particularly African American communities. We need to be able to have those race and racism, race, prejudice. We need to have those honest conversations and be able to take those on as well. Otherwise, we'll never really get to this equity and access and inclusion. So I'd like to see that as some future discussions.
Yeah, that's a excellent comment. Excellent comment. Okay, if there no other additional comments or thoughts, I again, Jim, I see Jim.
Hey, just real quick, what's going to happen with our discussion today? You're going to go back to CARB, and then we're going to hear back at some point in the next year about the follow-up conversation. Or...
Well, yeah, so we're going to, scope out some additional, Air Talks just listening sessions, and we'll take a closer look at the logistics too, and to see how we can encourage some more, participation. And, one of the other things that we're looking to do just to kind of keep the communication going, we are looking at coming out really over the next year, a series of Air Talk 6 bulletins that just talks about some of the things that we're doing. And so those become additional avenues for folks that can be used to provide comment. And then one thing that we are planning about a year from now, or maybe somewhere around August or September of next year, is we are planning on going back to the board and doing another Air Talk 6 update, where we basically are just going to roll up everything that's been going on, and the discussions that discussions such as these that we have with the communities are going to be, featured at that presentation as well. And so we'll use, continue to use the EJ blog, our website, the listserv to communicate and let folks know what's coming up, next. I think one thing I would ask, as you guys continue to, to talk amongst yourselves and others who aren't able to make it, tonight, if there's, your own meetings that you already have and you'd like us to come, just kind of reach out to us so we can work with you and come to your meeting and have a discussion about the topic of concern. Yeah, that would be helpful as well. We can. All right. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming down and spending some time with us this evening. And this is just the start, right? So this is not a one-shot discussion. This is going to be a continuum of discussions as we, work forward to, basically get cleaner communities for everybody. And so I see another slide up there. So Michaela, you got a part right here now?
That's me. I just wanted to plug in really quick that we do also have a survey, and I'll put the links for how to access that in the chat as well. And you can also scan the QR code that's on the screen. But that survey is going to expand on the poll questions, and it also gives you an opportunity to put your contact information in if you want to be on a listserv, because another thing that we are looking to do is one-on-one conversations as well. So you can put your information at the end of that survey to be added to the listserv or to follow up on your responses to the survey. And since we did have a small group, if you have colleagues that you think would be interested in providing some feedback or having conversations, please forward the link to them as well. We'll keep it open for a week. And if there's a desire to be longer than that, let us know too. But yeah, please feel free to share the link to that survey, and I'll go ahead and stop talking and put the links into the chat.
And one last thing too, I want to say too, if you have any kind of ideas about the start times or the days that more might be able to participate in these listening sessions, please let us know that as well.
Okay, did we have a slide with the contact information? Let's go ahead and display that for folks. There you go. Okay, again with that, let me just again extend my thanks for participating, and we'll hang around for a few minutes for those who want to have a few lingering questions or whatnot. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Everybody.
Good night.
Yeah,
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.